Today I am going to interview with the Rabbi of Liverpool, Mordechai Wollenberg. He is a Jewish priest and also called a rabbi. I would like to say thanks for giving this opportunity. I think it's a great opportunity in my career. I sit in front of you as an Indian because the last 3,000 years history, the Jewish people killed and executed, enslaved all over the world, except India. Recently, the Israeli government sent a delegation to India in our state, Kerala, Cochin, for giving a momentum to the king of Cochin, because the last 2,000 years they protected Jewish people. In India, it's a special country because so many culture and so many different views the people immigrated India. All that views and the culture flourished there. The Indian people is allowed them to flourish there and also growing there. That's why India is a very, very great country, I think. The Jewish is protected very carefully there. Our one of the Kochi is a very famous town in our state. The first mayor of Kochi is a Jewish. His name is Escoda. In such a way, I am sitting in front of you. I am very proud. I am going to ask some question about the Jewish tradition and Jewish history as well.
Before you do, I just want to say, Rabbi in Hebrew means a teacher.
Teacher,
okay,
yeah.
It specifically refers to teaching. So obviously I do other things,
Yeah.
social work and helping people, counselling, but Judaism, as you know, is known as the people of the book. So it's always been about learning the Torah, and that's why a rabbi, first and foremost, is a teacher. I just wanted to mention that because you mentioned the word, so I'm giving the translation.
Yeah, that's all I did.
Carry on.
Yeah. For my viewers, our community people, could you please explain what is your position in Liverpool and as a rabbi?
Right.
What about you? Could you please tell me?
Right, so as I said, a rabbi is a teacher. Rabbis tend to be married with families. I have 6 children and they all help me in my work in the community. I'm based here in Chilwell, in the synagogue. We're in my office now. I have a few hundred members in our synagogue. There are 2 other synagogues, Orthodox synagogues in the area. There's a Jewish school, there's a Reform synagogue, there are various other organisations. So it's a medium-sized Jewish community in Liverpool. There's a kosher deli here. And I'm primarily responsible for my congregation. So I was in Wales for 8 years before this, so I used to do a lot of things like prison chaplaincy and hospital chaplaincy. There are people here that do that. I can share the burden, as it were, with it's not a burden, the privilege, with other rabbis in town. So a lot of my work is pastoral work with my membership. Some of them are very devout, very observant, some of them are not so observant, some of them we see regularly, some of them we don't see so regularly, and part of my challenge is to connect with them and infuse them about Judaism and build relationships with them at whatever level their observance of Judaism is, because of course Judaism is very much a religion of action, following God's commandments. It's not enough to just believe and feel it in the heart, it's about action and observance of the laws.
Yeah, other religions, Christianity or other religions are concerned that prayer is more important, but the Jewish believe the action is more important. You mean
prayer is very important? What I'm saying is, and theology is also very important, but it has to be coupled with action. The person says, Rabbi, I believe in God, I feel good in my heart. Okay, but then God told us in the Torah that we have to keep, if we're Jewish, we have to keep the 613 commandments, like the kosher laws and the Sabbath laws, and how we treat other people, and how we treat animals, and how we treat the environment, and all these things, and honesty in business. This is all part of being a good Jew. So simply saying, I believe in God, or I pray even 3 times a day, which is very important in Judaism, is not enough in terms of what we believe God demands from us. So you might have some faiths that put emphasis on, so for example, certainly certain branches of Christianity, I'm no expert, but will put the emphasis on belief in the Trinity or whatever. Other religions put the emphasis on, or cultures put the emphasis on action and deeds. So Judaism is both. You have to believe in God, obviously you have to believe He gave us the Torah, and that we have to follow it, but it's also about actually following those commandments. It's a way of life. It has a lot of similarities with Islam, really, as a way of life. You know, the dietary laws, various ideas that we have. It's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, Judaism.
So 7 days.
24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Because the action is part of Judaism. My first question is, Bible says Jewish are chosen, and chosen by God. Unfortunately, you have been persecuted and enslaved by all over the world. Pogrom, the English word, derived from the Jewish execution. What is the real cause of behind these all merciless killings, these brutal killings against the Jewish?
Listen, even here I've been abused in the streets. I've had people shout Heil Hitler at me.
Yeah.
I'm a proud British citizen. My grandparents fought in World War II, World War I, for this country. They didn't fight for this country so that I could be abused on the streets. So it's a good question. I asked the same question. My children ask me the same question. Why are there people that hate us?
Yeah.
In modern times, I'm going to say it's probably the same reason, unfortunately, for most types of intolerance, which is we're different. We look different. I know we live in a multicultural society now, but I wear a kippah, I have a beard, I look a little bit different. Maybe the people feel threatened by that. I don't particularly want to quote Hitler, but it was Hitler who said that there were two things that the Jews gave to society, both of which he said were barbaric. One was circumcision, and the other was a conscience.
Yeah.
Right. So people have always, perhaps on the one hand, had an admiration for Jewish values, and at the same time hated the Jewish people for having those values, if that makes any sense. It's almost like they've resented it. The whole chosen people thing is very challenging, obviously. If you go around telling people, we don't go around telling people we're the chosen people, but the idea that we have a specific responsibility, the way I like to see it is we have more obligations before God, because we have to follow the Torah. Judaism is not a proselytizing faith. So my religion doesn't say that I have to convince you now to convert to Judaism in order to score points in heaven.
Yeah.
Right? You can be a righteous Gentile in Jewish tradition.
Yeah.
If you believe in God and you follow what's called the Noahide laws, you don't murder, you have a system of justice, you treat animals well, you have morality in relationships, you don't murder, you don't steal, and you believe in God, then you're a good person in Judaism, you go to heaven.
Yeah.
So you might say to me, that's not enough, I want to eat kosher, I want to pray 3 times a day, I want to keep the Sabbath. Okay, so you can convert to Judaism, and a convert is afforded great respect in Jewish tradition, straight from the Bible, respect for the convert, change your whole life around. But we don't say a person has to convert to be saved. So with the greatest respect to Christianity or Islam, where they do say basically you have to believe in our religion to be saved for salvation, Judaism doesn't say that. Judaism says if you're Jewish or you convert to Judaism, you have to follow these rules. If you're not, you don't.
Yeah.
You can, from my point of view, you can eat a bacon sandwich. I might ask you not to do it in my office or my house, because I don't eat bacon. But it doesn't offend me. You can drive on the Sabbath. That doesn't offend me. So Judaism, in a sense, is very benign, because it's a non-proselytizing faith. So in some ways it has more in common with Hinduism or Sikhism than Christianity and Islam. Jewish people have always wanted to basically just live quietly and get on with their lives. We don't have a problem. There's all these issues now about Sharia law and religious law in society, and all these issues, not just with Islam, but in general with cultures and different cultures and how they adjust to society. Judaism has never had a problem living in a non-Jewish society, because we don't say that the culture we live in has to adopt Jewish law. All I would ask as a Jew, as a religious Jew, is to be able to practice my faith. Thank God in this country, in Europe generally, as you said, in India and many countries in the world, in America, thank God, we have freedom of religion. So I don't care if there's non-kosher food on sale. I don't care that Saturday is not the day of rest, as long as I can keep my religion. So there's no conflict between Judaism and civilized, the rest of civilization. I can be a proud Jew and I can be a proud British citizen, because British law doesn't conflict with my beliefs and my laws. In fact, Jewish law says I have to observe the law of the land anyway. It only becomes a problem, let's say, obviously you go back to the 1930s, the Nuremberg laws, which banned certain Jewish practices. So obviously that's when it becomes a problem. If I'm restricted from practicing my faith and I have a crisis of conscience between keeping my religion or breaking the law, then it becomes a problem. Thank God that's not generally a problem in Europe. So coming back to your question, sorry I went off topic, but if you go back maybe 1500 years, certainly there was a strong anti-Semitism of Christian origin which believed that the Jews killed Jesus. Now my own understanding is that the people were asked who they wanted to be crucified and they shouted out his name. So it wasn't the Bet Din or the Sanhedrin that put him to death, it was the Romans. But for years, I think also perhaps one thing that's caused frustration over the years to different, you've had different cultures, Christianity and Islam particularly, that have arisen, that have conquered and that have taken over civilizations, and the Jewish people have always been stubborn. They've stuck to their religion. Why aren't they converting to my religion? Why aren't they changing their beliefs? Why are they so stubborn, these Jews? Nowadays we have a much more tolerant approach.
Yeah, because democracy is
So
flourishing.
you take Catholicism, it's a lot more tolerant now. But if you go back even 50, 100 years, there was a conscious mission to convert the Jews because they had to be convinced.
Yeah.
So I think that's part of it as well. I think in society today, unfortunately, the anti-Semitism that most people encounter is just stupid, ignorant racism.
Yeah.
It's not based in any theology.
Yeah.
You know, and we do have a very strong, like your own culture, we have very, and this is probably also the basis of probably a lot of racism that you find in general. There's a strong family structure, there's a strong community structure, and I think that evokes envy, honestly. People are jealous of that.
Yeah.
You know, people are jealous that there's a strong set of values that we have. It's not because we're superior racially, it's because we have a community structure, like your own community, which means that we know where our children are at night. You know, when the riots were going on in London, you know, the Jewish kids weren't rioting because their parents know where they are. You know, that's not because we're superior, but we have a family-based culture and we have a community culture. I think that sometimes that brings jealousy.
That's what
jealousy. And also, like many immigrants, you know, the Jewish immigrants in the 1920s, 30s worked very hard, and people were jealous. You know, like with the Indian and Pakistani immigrants in the 60s and 70s, and like in America with, you know, the riots in LA were, you know, between the blacks and the Koreans because it was all about jealousy and economic prosperity. So a lot of it's probably about that as well. But it's very insidious, it's very upsetting. Anti-Semitism is very, very upsetting, and it's one of those things that just doesn't go away.
You said that your family setup and the community setup, because of your family and the community setup, your life is more prosperous here. You are keeping more prosperity. That's why the jealousy is behind all the attacks. You mean?
I think some of it is that. You know, I must say also, you know, particularly in Europe, the Jewish community is still recovering from the Holocaust. So, for example, we just had a service of, I don't know, 15 people came probably, some of whom are devout. Okay, I don't know what people do because I don't follow them home, but I would bet that a large number don't wear a kippah like I wear. They put on a cap when they leave because they don't want to draw too much attention to themselves. Now that is very much a European thing, and I believe it's connected to the events of the Holocaust. To this day, even though we're talking 2-3 generations later, there is a certain reticence. Oh, I don't know if we want people to know we're Jewish. We don't want to stand out. You know, which is funny because nowadays everyone has their ethnic identity and their ethnic clothing. You know, and I look at the, you know, when I see the other immigrants that are walking around wearing their ethnic, you know, dress, I think to myself, it's a shame that my own community are not so proud of wearing their kippah or whatever. But there's a very strong sense of fear and concern in the Jewish community, even now. And I believe that's a European phenomenon because I suspect you wouldn't find that in India, you wouldn't find it in America or Israel.
The Theodor Herzl, you know, the Theodor Herzl is a well-known Zionist leader. Theodor Herzl has announced that if you are a Jew, you must wait for Messiah. And what could be the fate of other religion when Messiah came?
I didn't know Herzl said that. It's interesting because Herzl was actually a secular Zionist, meaning he wasn't a religious believer. And there's a large conflict in the Jewish world today between secular Zionism as a nationalist movement and religious belief. The State of Israel, which I love dearly, is a secular state. So, for example, not all Jewish law is kept in the State of Israel, which is a bit bizarre.
Recently the
now, in answer to your question, so the Jewish belief is that the times of the Mashiach, the Messianic era, which we believe has not yet happened but will happen in the future, as mentioned in the prophets and the scriptures, will involve a return of the Jewish people to the biblical land of Zion, what's now land of Israel. It will involve the famous quote from Isaiah that's on the UN building, like they shall beat their swords into plowshares. When they had the nuclear, the START treaty between America and Russia, which basically stopped the Cold War. So a number of rabbis at the time said this was a sign of the times of Messiah, because finally the world was the war was ending. Okay, unfortunately we've had wars since then, but we believe there'll be a time of peace and harmony. People will know God in the world, will see God revealed. It says the wolf will lie with the lamb and so on, as far as other people. So it says basically that we'll return to the situation we had, if you like, in the times of the Second Temple, that the temple will be restored, the Jewish people will be restored in Jerusalem, and the rest of the world will live in peace and harmony, and will recognize God, and will acknowledge God as a monotheistic God, and there'll be peace and harmony. We don't know exactly what's going to happen. There's conflicting prophecies. I mean, for example, you have Armageddon, which is very big in Christianity, like the war of Gog and Magog.